The rough, liver-spotted hand of Brenda Miller, my mother-in-law, swung with a merciless force. Without a shred of hesitation, she shoved my cream-white suitcase off the second-floor landing. Thump, clatter, crash, the sound of the suitcase tumbling down each step echoed in my ears. It felt like a series of dull thunderclaps, striking my already constricted chest. Finally, a sharp, shattering crack rang out as the suitcase slammed onto the cold tile of the foyer. The latches burst open. The expensive prescription supplements I'd scrimped and saved to buy for my hospitalized father, a few hastily packed changes of clothes, and the soft cashmere scarf I'd intended to give my own mother, everything spilled out, a pathetic display on the floor. "Where the hell do you think you're going, you bitch?" Brenda's spittle flew, nearly hitting my face. Her deep-set eyes burned with a familiar cruelty, a viciousness, and a pathological need for control. Her large, heavy frame blocked the top of the stairs, a mountain of flesh that seemed to suck the very air from my lungs. My hand, clutching my phone, trembled violently. The screen was still lit, displaying the cold, green letters, "Booking confirmed. Amtrak, departing in 3 hours." I bit the inside of my lip until I tasted blood, trying to swallow the lump in my throat so my voice would sound calm, but the tremor at the end of my words betrayed a desperate, hopeless plea. "Brenda, my dad had a heart attack. He's in the ICU. The doctors say it's not looking good. I have to go see him. Just for 3 days. I swear, I'll be on the first bus back the day after Thanksgiving. Cut the crap." Crack. A stunning slap. Though I'd instinctively flinched, Brenda's calloused hand still connected with my cheek, a hot, stinging numbness spreading across my skin. She planted her hands on her hips, her voice a screech. "Thanksgiving is tomorrow. Who's gonna cook for 18 people? The turkey, the ham, the pies, who's doing it? Who's cleaning this house? Who's setting out the good china for the family? You think you can just walk out and leave this mountain of work to kill an old woman like me? Or do you want Kevin's aunts to laugh at this family, to say we were cursed with a useless daughter-in-law?" The 18 people she mentioned was the entire Miller clan, set to descend upon us tomorrow. My in-laws, my husband Kevin, his 2 older brothers, and 2 older sisters with their spouses and children, plus a few close relatives. From the 3rd year I'd stepped into this house as a bride, the duty of serving those 18 mouths had fallen squarely on my shoulders. Why? Because Kevin used to stroke my hair and say, "Sarah, honey, you're the best at this. Mom adores you." Because my mother-in-law used to pat my shoulder with false affection and say, "Sarah, you're the youngest wife here. It's only right you do a little more. It shows respect." That little more had stretched into 5 long years. From the morning of Thanksgiving Eve until the last of the leftovers were gone, an aching back and sore feet were my constant companions. In return, all I ever got were sharp-tongued critiques. "This gravy is lumpy. The floor still feels sticky." For 5 years, I was a spinning top, whipped endlessly by the twin lashes of dutiful and capable. But today, I couldn't spin anymore. "Brenda! My father is dying in a hospital," I pleaded, my voice rising, my eyes burning with unshed tears. "I'm his only daughter nearby. My brother is overseas and can't get back in time. My mom is at the hospital all by herself. She's falling apart. Can't I just go see my own father?" "Whether your father lives or dies has nothing to do with the Miller family," Brenda hissed, her voice like nails on a chalkboard. "A woman who gets married is no longer her father's daughter. You're a Miller now. You live and die as a Miller. This Thanksgiving dinner can't be short one servant. Forget 3 days, you're not stepping out that door for even half a day." My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. An icy chill ran from my chest through my veins, numbing my limbs. This was the mother-in-law I had served, the woman I had called Mom with a sweet smile for 5 years. Just then, heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs. It was Kevin. He'd been watching TV downstairs and came up to see about the noise. Seeing him was like a drowning person spotting a log. My eyes filled with desperate appeal. "Kevin, talk to your mom." "It's my dad." Kevin's thick eyebrows furrowed. He glanced at his enraged mother, then at my red, swollen cheek. There was no pity in his eyes, only that familiar impatience and a frighteningly cold detachment. I'm not trying to blame you, Sarah, he began, his tone patronizing, but you're really not thinking this through. Just yesterday, Dad was saying this year's Thanksgiving spread has to be bigger and better than ever. The whole family is watching. If you leave, who does all this fall on? Mom's getting old. You want her slaving away in the kitchen? But my dad, your mom is there with him. Kevin cut me off, his tone as casual as if he were deciding what to have for dinner. Worst case, hire a home health aide. If you're short on cash, I'll send you $500. After Thanksgiving, on Saturday, I'll drive you down to visit him. See? Problem solved. $500. An aide. Wait until Saturday. I stared blankly at the man I had shared a bed with for 7 years. The tenderness from when we were dating, the attentiveness of our newlywed days, I didn't know when it had all been eroded by the trivialities of life and the toxic vortex of his family, worn down until he was unrecognizable. He was no longer the boy who would drive across town at midnight just to buy me a bowl of hot soup. He was now his mother's most effective accomplice, the final lock on the cage that imprisoned me. No, I heard my own voice, dry but strangely firm. I have to go today. I've already bought the ticket. You what? Kevin's brow knotted in anger. He took a step forward, hand outstretched. Give me the phone. I instinctively hid it behind my back. Give it to me, he roared, violently snatching the phone from my hand. He unlocked the screen he'd always known my password. His thumb flew across the screen, opening the Amtrak app. He found the booking. And then, right before my eyes, as Brenda watched with a triumphant smirk, he coolly tapped the screen a few times. Cancellation? Successful. He tossed the phone back at me. On the screen was the cancellation confirmation. You can eat the cancellation fee, he said, his voice flat. And remember your place. Don't cause trouble over nothing. He had canceled the ticket that was my lifeline to my dying father. The string of reason in my brain snapped. But strangely, I didn't scream. All the fury, the grief, the terror, the despair, it all suddenly compressed into a cold, numb, and bizarrely placid feeling. Brenda snorted, her chin held high in victory. Seeing the matter resolved, Kevin turned to go back downstairs, muttering, "Go clean up that mess in the foyer. It looks like hell. Oh, and my older brother's family is coming for dinner tonight. Make 2 extra main dishes." I looked at his retreating back, at the chaotic pile of my belongings on the floor, at the victor's smug expression on my mother-in-law's face. Tss, the phone in my hand vibrated, a voicemail from my mother. I numbly pressed play, putting it on speaker. My mother's voice filled the quiet stairwell, hoarse, holding back sobs, exhausted to her core. "Sarah, your father just had another episode. He was struggling to breathe. The doctor said, we need to prepare for the worst. Are you on the train yet? Call me when you're getting close. I'm so scared, honey." The recording ended. A deathly silence fell. Brenda curled her lip in contempt. Kevin's footsteps paused for a single second on the stairs, but he didn't turn around. I slowly crouched down and began to pick up my scattered belongings. The dented box of supplements, the cashmere scarf now covered in dust. I gently, slowly patted the dust off the scarf. Then I lifted my head, looking directly into my mother-in-law's eyes, then at my husband's fading silhouette downstairs. "Fine," I said, my voice flat, without a ripple of emotion. "I won't go." Brenda's face twisted into a look of disgust that said, "See, if you'd just been obedient from the start." Kevin seemed to let out a sigh of relief and continued down the stairs. I gathered my things, retreated back into the second-floor bedroom, and locked the door. I leaned my back against the cold wood, sliding down to the floor. My cheek still throbbed, but my heart felt as if a giant, gaping hole had been torn in it, a cold wind howling through. No, not a cold wind. It was a poisonous flame named hatred, silently kindling its first embers in the ashes of my submission. I took out my phone, not to look at the cancellation notice, but to open the voice recorder app. A small red dot was blinking silently. Everything that had just happened on the stairs from my dad had a heart attack, to the sharp crack of the slap, to Brenda's whether your father lives or dies has nothing to do with us, to Kevin's cold cancellation successful, and even my mother's desperate voicemail. Everything, every single sound, had been recorded. I carefully saved the file and synced it to the cloud. Then I stood up, walked to the vanity, and looked at the woman in the mirror. Her left cheek was red and swollen, her eyes empty, soulless. Sarah, you're a joke, but every joke has to have a punchline, and the one who laughs last is the real winner. Thanksgiving dinner? 18 people? Fine. I stared at my reflection, and my lips curled, ever so slowly, into a stiff, ferocious, and twisted smile. Just you wait, I whispered, the words as light as a curse, and as heavy as an oath. I wasn't in the room for long. The sound of fists pounding on the door and Brenda's shrill voice shattered the quiet. Are you hatching eggs in there? Get your ass down here and clean up. Your sister-in-law Jessica is here, and Tiffany is on her way. Do you think you're some kind of princess? Jessica and Tiffany were the wives of Kevin's two older brothers. Besides my mother-in-law, they were the ones most entitled to point fingers at me. Their modus operandi was to talk, never to act, and to find fault in everything I did. In previous years, while I prepared the Thanksgiving feast, they would at most wash a few stalks of celery before retiring to the sofa to eat chips and criticize me for not simmering the gravy long enough or for the salad not being crisp enough. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair in the mirror, intentionally pulling a few strands over my swollen cheek, and opened the door. The living room was already bustling. Jessica and Tiffany were there with their gaggle of kids, who were swarming the pile of luggage I had just brought up. Well, look who was planning a little getaway to live the high life. Jessica sneered, picking up the dented box of supplements and weighing it in her hand. Buying the fancy stuff, I see. Must have cost a pretty penny. Mom, no offense, but this sister-in-law of ours has her heart set on things outside this family. Tiffany was more direct. She pulled out the dusty cashmere scarf, feigning surprise. Ooh, is this real cashmere? For your mother, Sarah? You know, no offense, but our own mother-in-law here sacrifices so much, and I've never seen you buy her a scarf this nice. Your priorities seem a little skewed. Brenda's face darkened, and she shot me a look that could burn holes in steel. I lowered my eyes, walked over without a word, snatched the scarf from Tiffany's hand, put it away, and started cleaning up the mess in the foyer. My silence seemed to bore them. Or perhaps they thought I was thoroughly broken. The two sisters-in-law quickly changed the subject, turning to discuss the Thanksgiving menu with Brenda, their voices loud and full of the self-satisfaction of the privileged. I put my luggage in the corner of my bedroom and went back downstairs. I began cleaning the living room, wiping tables, dusting shelves, washing fruit, and making tea for the very people who sat there, passing judgment on me. I moved like a pre-programmed machine. In the afternoon, Kevin's two sisters arrived with their families. The older one, Karen, lived nearby and was a frequent, overbearing guest with a tongue that spared no one. The younger, Susan, lived in the next state and only visited a few times a year, but each time she carried herself with an air of superiority. The house instantly transformed into a chaotic marketplace. Kids ran screaming. Adults laughed and chattered loudly. Sunflower seed shells and fruit peels littered the floor. And I was the only shadow, a blur of constant motion, in the middle of the chaos. Get more water. Brew more tea. Pick up the trash the kids made. And I had to keep my ears open for their endless stream of commands and complaints. Sarah, these oranges are dry. Get a new plate. You didn't wipe the coffee table properly. Are you blind? There are a lot of us tonight. Cook more rice. Don't run out like last year. It was so embarrassing. I obeyed every command, my face a mask of emotionless compliance. The place in my chest where my heart was supposed to be had gone numb. I no longer felt pain. I was just observing, like an outsider. I coolly observed every demon in this den. Brenda was the demon king, holding the power of life and death, taking pleasure in tormenting me. Kevin was the warden, responsible for reinforcing the bars of my cage, for breaking my wings if I ever tried to fly. The two sisters-in-law were the imps, cheering from the sidelines, adding fuel to the fire. The two sisters were the patrol guards, always looking for faults to assert their authority. And I was the sacrifice, pinned to the bottom of the pyre, destined to never be allowed to turn over. What a nauseatingly happy family portrait. At dinner, the extended family gathered around a massive round table. I had cooked 8 main dishes and a soup, my feet never stopping. By the time I brought the last dish to the table and went to get myself a bowl of rice, the table was already a war zone. The kids were fighting over pieces of meat, and the adults had eaten their fill. There wasn't a single empty seat left for me. I held my bowl of now cold rice and stood at the edge of the kitchen, listening to their boisterous laughter. The plain white rice tasted bitter in my mouth. "Oh, right, Sarah," Karen, the older sister, said suddenly while picking her teeth. "Where's your driver's license? Let me borrow it for a sec." I froze and looked up at her. "What for?" Karen looked impatient. "My office is doing a family information registration drive. I need a copy." "Hurry up." I instinctively looked at Kevin. He was gnawing on a chicken leg and didn't even look up. "She asked for it, just give it to her." "What's taking you so long?" A cold, venomous premonition slithered down my spine. I put down my bowl and slowly walked up to the second-floor bedroom. I always kept my license in a specific wallet compartment. When I brought it down and handed it to Karen, she glanced at it for a second before casually tossing it to Brenda, who was sitting next to her. "Mom, you should hold on to this," Karen said to Brenda, her tone suggesting it was the most obvious thing in the world. "It's not safe with her." Brenda took the plastic card, stroking it in her hand as if she were strangling a small insect. "Mom," I heard my own voice tremble. "I need my ID." Brenda sneered. "What do you need it for? To secretly buy another train ticket?" "Let me tell you, Sarah, get that thought out of your head. You're not going anywhere this year. Just be a good girl and stay home and work." Tiffany, the sister-in-law, chimed in. "Mom is doing this for your own good, for the good of this family. Holding your ID is just to prevent you from being young and impulsive and doing something rash. Once things settle down with your family, Kevin can take you for a visit after the holiday. Isn't that better?" I need it for the hospital billing for my father," I tried to argue weakly. "Enough! Stop nagging!" Kevin slammed his hand on the table, splashing soup. He glared at me, his eyes blazing with the fury of a man whose authority had been challenged. "Mom and Karen are just trying to do what's best for this family. If you keep this up, don't blame me for getting rough." I looked at his contorted face, at the indifferent or amused expressions of everyone at the table, at the ID card that belonged to me, but was now held captive by my mother-in-law. The cold numbness spread through me again. I closed my eyes. "Fine," I said, turning and walking back to the kitchen to finish my cold rice. Confiscating my ID was like removing a piece of my spine. But it wasn't enough for them. They needed more. Late that night, after I'd finally cleaned up the battlefield in the kitchen and seen the drunken relatives off, I dragged my exhausted body to our bedroom. Kevin was already showered, lying on the bed scrolling through his phone, not even bothering to look up. I silently went into the bathroom. The warm water cascaded over my body but couldn't wash away the bone-deep chill that had seeped into my marrow. I looked at myself in the mirror, a pale face, eyes that had lost their light, now just a pool of stagnant, dead water. When I stepped out of the bathroom, I froze. On the floor, right in front of the bathroom door, was a dark, coiled object. I crouched down to get a closer look. It was a metal chain, as thick as my little finger. One end was attached to a heavy-duty U-lock, the kind used for bicycles. The other end was a cold metal ankle cuff, lined with a thin layer of leather on the inside. The blood in my veins turned to ice. "What is this?" I heard my voice, dry and cracked. Kevin finally looked up from his phone. His face was blank, tinged with annoyance. "Starting tonight, until you've behaved and cooked Thanksgiving dinner, and this whole holiday is over, you'll wear this when you sleep." "Wear this?" I repeated each word, feeling like a razor blade was being dragged across my throat. "I'm going to chain you." "What else?" Kevin sat up, his tone so calm it was chilling. "Mom and the sisters are worried. They're afraid you'll get ideas in the middle of the night and try to run off. With this on, everyone can rest easy. You should just accept your place." "Rest easy? Accept my place?" I looked at the metal chain, glinting coldly under the dim bedside lamp, at that hideous ankle cuff. This wasn't how you treated a person. This was how you treated an animal, a prisoner. I snapped my head up, stared him dead in the eyes, and bit out each word. "Am I your wife, or a dog you keep on a leash. Kevin frowned, as if I were being completely unreasonable. What's the point of saying useless things like that? I told you to wear it, so wear it. You had a good thing going, but you just had to insist on going back to your parents. Hurry up. I'm tired. He stood up and walked toward me with the cuff. I instinctively backed away until my back hit the cold wall. There was nowhere else to go. No, I won't wear it. The last of my numbness finally shattered, replaced by raw fear. I started to tremble. This isn't up for discussion. Kevin reached out and grabbed my ankle. His grip was incredibly strong, squeezing until I cried out in pain. The cold leather cuff snapped around my ankle. Then came a dry, metallic click. It was locked. He dragged the chain over to the bed and looped the U-lock through the leg of the heavy, solid oak bed frame. Click. The lock was secured. The chain wasn't long. My range of motion was limited to the space between the edge of the bed and the bathroom door. There. Now go to sleep, Kevin said, dusting off his hands as if he'd just finished a simple chore. He flopped onto the bed and turned his back to me. I stood frozen in place. The cold from the cuff on my ankle spread upwards, along with a suffocating, clear-as-day humiliation of being chained. The chain was short. Any slight movement I made would cause it to clank loudly. I slid down the wall and sat on the cold floor. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the metal chain with a sinister, eerie glow. I looked at the familiar back of the man on the bed. When we were first in love, he would tuck my cold feet into his chest in the winter, saying he was afraid I'd get cold. When we were first married, he would warm up my side of the bed before calling me to sleep. When did everything change? Was it the first time his mother yelled at me in front of him and he just stared at his phone? Or the first time I collapsed from exhaustion in the kitchen and he told me working more was good exercise? I couldn't remember. 7 years of my youth. That fragile bit of love had been worn away to nothing. The chain on my leg was heavy and cold, but my heart was heavier, colder. I curled into a ball in the corner, hugging my knees, burying my face. I didn't cry. The tears had all dried up the moment he'd hit cancel on that life-saving train ticket. I don't know how much time passed. The sound of Kevin's steady snoring filled the room. I slowly lifted my head. There were no tears on my face, only a hollow, bone-chilling calm. The moonlight fell into my eyes, but reflected nothing, like a bottomless swamp. I shifted my legs slightly. The chain clanked. The sound was stark in the dead of night. I looked down at the hideous metal cuff, clamped around my ankle. Then, very slowly, I reached out and touched the cold metal of the lock with my fingertips. The lock, the chain, the ID. They wanted to chain my feet. They wanted to clip my wings. I slowly pulled my hand back, hugging myself tighter. Fine. This is good. Thanksgiving Eve, wasn't it? A Thanksgiving dinner for 18, wasn't it? I'll wait. Just you wait. I closed my eyes. Darkness enveloped me. But I knew, deep in the cold ashes of my heart, something was growing, festering, something colder than ice, more frantic than despair. It was the seed of destruction, silently breaking through the soil. The sky was still black when I was jolted awake by Brenda pounding on the bedroom door with a broom handle. What time is it? You think you're royalty? Get up. It's Thanksgiving Eve. There's a mountain of work to do. Her voice was a rusty saw cutting through sheet metal, piercing the thin barrier of my fitful sleep. The heavy, cold weight on my ankle immediately reminded me of my reality. I shifted, and the chain clanked, a mocking soundtrack to the surreal, humiliating truth of the previous night. Kevin grunted in annoyance, rolled over, and went back to sleep, completely unconcerned. I sat up and touched the cold lock. It was clamped tight to the bed frame. The key was surely in Brenda's or Kevin's pocket. I gave it a hard tug. It didn't budge. Outside, Brenda was losing patience and started kicking the door. I silently stood. The chain was just long enough for me to reach the bathroom. I washed my face and brushed my teeth as fast as I could. The cold water on my face helped clear the fog in my head. The woman in the mirror had dark circles under her eyes and a pale complexion, but her gaze was no longer the dead emptiness of the night before. It was a cold, still calm, like a frozen lake before a blizzard. I opened the door to Brenda's cruel face. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, lingering on my ankle. My pajama pants covered part of it, but the rough shape of the lock and chain was still visible. The corner of her mouth twitched into a satisfied smirk. "What took you so long?" "No breakfast this morning." "Get downstairs and start working." She moved aside, shooing me away like an animal. I dragged the heavy chain down the stairs, its clanking echoing in the quiet house. Jessica and Tiffany were already at the dining table, waiting for breakfast to be served. When they saw the chain on my leg, they exchanged a knowing glance, their smirks barely hidden. My, Sarah, what a unique ankle bracelet you have there," Jessica said, covering her mouth to giggle. "Mom is just doing what's best for the family," Tiffany added with a sigh of mock sympathy. "See? If you had just been obedient, none of this would have happened. Why do you always have to make everyone angry?" I ignored them and went straight to the kitchen. The chain restricted my movements, but I was used to working at high intensity in this small space. I cooked oatmeal, steamed some buns, and sliced pickles. The chain followed my every step, a dull, monotonous clanking, the soundtrack of my humiliation. I served breakfast. No one said thank you or you worked hard. They ate, complaining the oatmeal was too thin and the buns too dense. I stood silently by the kitchen door, waiting for them to finish so I could clean up their mess. And then, the real hell began. Brenda produced a long, detailed list of family traditions and began issuing orders. First, a deep clean of the entire house, all windows, all curtains, polish all the wood furniture. Then, the complex preparation of the display dishes. The turkey had to be trussed perfectly, the ham scored in a diamond pattern, the pies with perfect lattice crusts. And finally, the colossal menu for the 18-person Thanksgiving dinner. 8 appetizers, 12 hot dishes, 2 soups, countless desserts and side dishes. Every single task fell on me. "This all has to be done today," Brenda commanded, hands on her hips. "Tomorrow morning we set the formal table, and in the afternoon we start cooking the main feast. No mistakes. If you mess up and embarrass this family in front of the relatives, I'll skin you alive." I silently took the list, staring at the dense lines of text without a word. The chain on my leg was heavy, but my heart felt heavier, sinking into a state of bizarre calm. I began to work. While cleaning the windows, the chain got tangled, preventing me from climbing on a stool. I had to stretch and contort my body, cleaning one small patch at a time. The water was cold, and the wind whistling through the window frames cut at my raw skin. In the living room, Brenda and the 2 sisters-in-law sat by the fireplace, eating chips and watching daytime television, occasionally bursting into laughter. "You see, a daughter-in-law like that needs to be taught a lesson," Brenda's voice carried clearly. "You're so right, Mom. Only a firm hand like yours can keep things in order," Jessica chimed in. I scrubbed the glass harder, my hands red and numb from the cold. The window reflected my faint shadow and the warm, harmonious family scene behind me. So harmonious, if you ignored the chained slave in the kitchen. Washing the heavy drapes was even worse. I had to take them down, soak them, scrub them by hand, and hang them out to dry. The chain kept tripping me. I nearly fell several times. No one offered to help. Kevin had left early in the morning with his brothers-in-law on the pretext of buying beer and cigars, escaping the work. The men gathered in a corner of the living room, playing poker, shouting and filling the air with smoke. I stood alone on the cold balcony, wringing out the heavy fabric, my fingers white and wrinkled from the water. At noon, they ate a quick lunch I'd thrown together, complaining about the taste. I scarfed down a few bites of cold leftovers and threw myself back into the battle. The turkey and ham needed to be prepped. I followed Brenda's exacting instructions, meticulous in every detail. The sharp knife slid across the turkey's skin. The frozen lake in my heart seemed to crack slightly. Prepping the ingredients for the main feast was a monumental undertaking. Brenda had bought a live turkey from a local farm. "You don't even know how to do this?" she sneered, tossing the knife and the struggling bird in front of me. She then expertly slaughtered a chicken for that night's dinner. Blood splattered on the floor, a few drops hitting my face, warm and metallic. I wiped the blood away with the back of my hand and picked up the knife. The bird thrashed in my grip. I closed my eyes and brought the knife down. The neck severed. Hot blood gushed out, spattering my hands and my apron. The first one, my hands shook. The second, I was steadier. By the time I had to gut the turkey, I could calmly watch the life drain from it, then expertly pluck and clean it. While scaling fish and gutting them, their tails still flapped on the cutting board. While cleaning the chitlins for a side dish, the stench was nauseating. I did it all mechanically. The chain dragged across the slick, greasy floor. Clank, clank. My hands were covered in blood, scales, and grime. The cold water stung the small cuts on my skin, but this physical pain was nothing compared to the cold shackle on my ankle, nothing compared to the desolate wasteland in my heart. My mind felt split in two. One half was executing commands with precision slicing, dicing, marinating. The other half was floating above, coldly observing it all. Observing this woman, chained like an animal, working like a machine. Observing the noise, the chatter, the critiques from the living room. Sarah, the fat needs to be rendered first. How many times do I have to tell you? Sarah, the lattice on this pie is ugly. Do it again. There's water on the floor. Someone could slip. Clean it up now. I did as I was told. No arguments, no explanations, no expression, like a programmed doll. Only occasionally, when I paused and glanced toward the living room, a flash of Arctic light would shoot through my eyes, so fast it could have been an illusion. As night fell, I had finally completed most of the list. The windows gleamed, the curtains were clean. The display dishes were arranged on the sideboard. In the kitchen, prepped ingredients filled the fridge and counters. I was covered in a strange mix of grease, blood, and bleach, my hair a mess, my apron filthy. The chain and lock on my ankle were caked with grime. I could barely stand. My back felt broken. My fingers were swollen and stiff. Brenda inspected my work like a queen dowager, pointing out a few specks of dust and muttering some insults, but she seemed generally satisfied. All right, that's enough for today. Tomorrow morning, 5 a.m., sharp to set the formal table. If you're late, I'll skin you. She threw the words over her shoulder and lumbered back to the TV. I collapsed onto a small stool in the corner of the kitchen, too tired to even take off my apron. From the living room came the sound of the TV, laughter, kids playing, warm lights, plentiful food, the joy of reunion. None of it had anything to do with me. I was locked out of that world of light and warmth by a metal chain, imprisoned in this dark, cold, greasy corner. I looked down at my swollen, scratched hands. My gaze slid down to the cold chain on my ankle. Under the dim kitchen light, it glinted with the dull sheen of submission. But I was not submitting. I was accumulating every bit of exhaustion, every bit of humiliation, every ounce of bone-chilling hatred. I gathered them all, carefully, like hoarding an ember, and hid them in the deepest, darkest corner of my heart. Then, I slowly raised my hand, not to wipe my face or rub my aching shoulders. With my dirty fingertips, I slowly touched a small, plain silver locket hidden under the collar of my sweater. The locket was hollow and very light. No one, not even Kevin, knew what was inside. It was a birthday gift from my father last year, an empty locket that could be opened. He had smiled and said, "Sarah, it's empty. You can keep any little secret of yours inside." What was inside now was not a little secret. It was something much heavier. I lowered my hand, my face blank, showing only the indifference of someone pushed to the absolute limit. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. The formal table. The 18-person feast. I shifted my leg. The chain clanked softly, as if in response, as if counting down. Just you wait. The overture was just beginning. 5 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning. The sky was still inky black. The clanking of the chain on the floorboards sounded precisely on time in the second-floor bedroom. This time, I didn't need Brenda's pounding. I woke up on my own. The skin around my ankle was raw and chafed, stinging with every movement. But I had compartmentalized this pain, filed it away as sensory data to be dealt with later. Kevin was snoring like a freight train, oblivious. I silently brushed my teeth, the icy water a jolt to my system. The woman in the mirror had heavy, dark circles under her eyes, but her gaze was a frozen, solidified calm. Downstairs, The kitchen light was already on. Brenda stood in the middle of the room like a warden. Seeing me, she grunted. "About time. Get the dough from yesterday and start making the dinner rolls. Then set the formal table. Not a single fork out of place." The chain hindered my steps but not my numb efficiency. I kneaded dough, shaped rolls, and put them in the oven. I took out the good china, the silverware, the crystal glasses. Each piece had to be polished and placed according to Brenda's ironclad rules. I was a precise machine, moving silently in the cold kitchen, accompanied only by the monotonous clank of the chain. As dawn broke, the rolls were baked, and the table was set to perfection. The men of the house, Kevin, his brothers-in-law were roused by Brenda, yawning and grumbling as they got ready. The women Brenda, the sisters-in-law, Kevin's sisters, were dressed in their holiday best, makeup and jewelry sparkling, waiting for the feast to begin. No one spared me a glance. I was still in yesterday's greasy clothes, hair tied back haphazardly, the absurd chain on my leg, a ghost completely out of place in this festive scene. I retreated into the shadows of the kitchen doorway. The Thanksgiving prayer began. My father-in-law, George, as the head of the family, said a long, rambling grace, asking for blessings and prosperity for the clan. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. They were praying for blessings on the very house that chained me like an animal, that worked me like a slave. When the prayer was over, Brenda waved a dismissive hand. "All right, clean that up and start on lunch. This afternoon, the main cooking begins." The real battle had started, a Thanksgiving dinner for 18. The thought alone was enough to make one's skin crawl. But I no longer had the luxury of crawling skin. I was a wind-up doll, plunging headfirst into the smoke and grease of the kitchen. 8 appetizers, deviled eggs, shrimp cocktail, a cheese board, pigs in a blanket, stuffed mushrooms, cranberry brie bites, spinach dip, bacon-wrapped dates, 12 hot dishes, a 2-pound roast turkey, a honey-glazed ham, sausage and cornbread stuffing, mashed potatoes with gravy, green bean casserole, sweet potato casserole with marshmallows, roasted Brussels sprouts with bacon, creamed corn, macaroni and cheese, glazed carrots, Parker House rolls, and a Jell-O mold, 2 soups, butternut squash and French onion. Not to mention the pies, pumpkin, pecan, apple, and a massive relish tray. I was alone, completely alone. Brenda would occasionally step in, not to help, but to supervise and criticize. Jessica and Tiffany entered once, one to steal a piece of freshly fried bacon, the other to complain about the smell of onions before fleeing. Kevin's sisters didn't even bother to cross the kitchen threshold. The chain repeatedly got caught on my feet. Twice, it almost sent me sprawling, and I had to catch myself on the edge of the hot stove, searing my palm. I bit my lip to keep from crying out, ran it under cold water, and went back to chopping, mixing, and stirring. The kitchen was a sauna of steam and smoke. Sweat poured down my forehead, stinging my eyes. My apron was soaked through. The cuts and burns on my hands throbbed as sweat and spices seeped into them. But I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel pain. My mind was unnaturally sharp, filled with a strange, dark excitement. I watched the raw ingredients transform into beautiful, aromatic dishes under my hands. My mind was a cold calculator. How much salt? How much sugar? How much thyme? My fingers moved over the spice jars with steady precision. For some dishes, I followed Brenda's rigid family recipes to the letter. But for others, I made tiny, imperceptible adjustments. For example, in the gravy destined for the eldest brother-in-law, the pickiest eater and my most vocal critic, I added a generous dash of liquid smoke, an ingredient I knew he despised. In the sweet potato casserole, a favorite of Tiffany's, I added an extra spoonful of orange zest, making the flavor sharper, almost harsh. In the salad dressing for Jessica, who was always making passive-aggressive comments, I added a pinch of a spice blend I'd discovered. She had a mild allergy, to just enough to make her itchy and uncomfortable after eating, but not enough to cause a serious reaction. And in the sausage stuffing, Brenda's pride and joy, I mixed in a tiny bit of the rendered turkey fat that was slightly, almost undetectably, rancid. It wouldn't make anyone sick, but it would leave a strange, unpleasant aftertaste, just enough to cause indigestion and ruin her enjoyment. These adjustments were a subtle, silent conspiracy woven into the fabric of my cooking. My movements were fluid, my face a numb, placid mask. No one watching could have guessed that the chained woman working so diligently was secretly poisoning the feast. Time passed in a haze of sizzling oil and rising steam. The sky outside turned from bright afternoon to dusk, then to dark. Distant fireworks began to pop. Around 4 p.m., the families started arriving, filling the house with a cacophony of noise. The kitchen grew hotter. I was a pig on a spit. "Sarah, is the turkey done? Arrange the relish tray properly. Don't be so sloppy. The gravy is bland. Add more salt. Can't you taste?" The commands and criticisms were relentless. I spun between the stove, the sink, and the counter. The chain clanked, my only companion. At 6 p.m., the Thanksgiving dinner was finally ready. The massive table groaned under the weight of the food. 18 people-in-laws, brothers, sisters, spouses, children, relatives squeezed around the table, a loud, boisterous crowd. "Let's eat," Brenda announced, her face flushed with pride. They all sat down, toasting each other, saying their thanks. The festive atmosphere was at its peak. I took off my filthy apron and dragged the clanking, conspicuous chain under the warm yellow lights. I quietly filled a small plate for myself with a few scraps and was about to retreat to the kitchen. "Hey, Sarah," Karen called out suddenly, a fake smile plastered on her face. "You've worked all day. Don't eat in the kitchen. Grab a stool and sit over there." She pointed to the most obscure corner of the room, near the hallway. The chatter at the table paused for a beat. All eyes turned to me, or rather, to the metal chain on my ankle. In their gazes, I saw curiosity, judgment, indifference, and undisguised mockery from Tiffany. Brenda frowned, annoyed at her daughter for making a scene, but didn't object. Kevin shot me a glare. "Well? Karen told you to sit, so sit. What are you waiting for?" I stood frozen, holding my plate. The chain felt ice-cold on my ankle. The steaming food on the table reflected the flushed, happy faces of the entire family. "No, thank you," I heard myself say, my voice flat and emotionless. "I still have some things to do in the kitchen." I turned and dragged the chain back toward the cold, greasy kitchen. The noise behind me resumed, as if nothing had happened. They were quickly lost again in good food, fine wine, and delusions of family prosperity. I leaned against the cold tile wall in the kitchen and slowly ate my cold food. I could hear the laughter and clinking glasses from the dining room. "Mom, this ham is amazing. This turkey is cooked perfectly. Sarah's skills are getting better. Karen, that new bracelet is gorgeous." A toast to another year of health and wealth for the Miller family. I slowly swallowed, then looked up through the kitchen pass-through at the warm, happy family reunion. Then I looked down at the chain, glowing darkly on my ankle. I reached up and gently squeezed the small silver locket at my chest. The secret inside was still safe. The noise in the dining room reached a crescendo. They started making toasts, wishing each other well. I listened to their loud voices, their laughter, their praise for my cooking mixed with comments about my ungratefulness. My lips, in the dark corner where no one could see, twitched into a cold, sharp line. It wasn't a smile. It was the curve of a blade, waiting for the harvest. "Eat, drink, enjoy the family feast I so carefully prepared for you." I set my plate down and turned on the faucet. The cold water washed over my greasy hands and washed away the last, tiny spark of warmth that might have once existed in my heart. All right. The appetizers were served. The main course was about to begin. The dinner lasted nearly 2 hours. The dining room was a disaster of dirty plates and spilled wine. The men were drunk and loud, bragging about their careers. The women, tipsy on wine, gossiped and critiqued, eventually steering the conversation to me, the ungrateful daughter-in-law, and praising Brenda's firm hand. The kids, long since finished eating, were running wild. I was a silent shadow, clearing plates, bringing out dessert, wiping up spills. The clanking of the chain was mostly lost in the din. No one helped me. No one even offered a perfunctory I was used to it. Or rather, my heart no longer registered it. I worked mechanically, my ears a fine-tuned radar, catching every conversation. "The food's okay today, but why does the gravy taste like an ashtray?" the eldest brother-in-law complained. "Oh, stop it. You're just being picky," Karen snapped, though she couldn't help but scratch her arm. "But is it buggy in here? I feel kind of itchy." "It's probably just your new sweater," Tiffany chimed in, though she was shifting uncomfortably herself. But did anyone else think the sweet potatoes were weirdly sour? Brenda, basking in the glow of praise, overheard and shot them a glare. "You've got a full belly and still can't keep your mouth shut. Do you have any idea how hard Sarah worked to make all this?" It sounded like she was defending me, but she was really just reinforcing her own narrative of a fair but strict matriarch. Kevin, his face red from alcohol, was boasting to his brother. "You can't be soft on women, bro. You gotta lay down the law." Look at her now, obedient, hardworking. Perfect. I was carrying a tall stack of dirty dishes back to the kitchen. As I passed behind Kevin, he gestured wildly, and his elbow slammed into my hip. Crash! The top plates fell, shattering on the floor, splashing gravy and scraps everywhere. "Hey! What the hell are you doing?" Kevin, startled, spun around and erupted in fury. "Clumsy idiot! Breaking dishes on Thanksgiving. What bad luck!" The entire table stared. Disgust, blame, a few glimmers of schadenfreude. Brenda's face went black. "You destructive little. Do you know how much those plates cost? Useless. Clean it up. The sight of you makes me sick." I didn't say a word. I crouched down to pick up the sharp shards. A piece of ceramic sliced my finger, and blood welled up. I just winced and kept picking. When I was done, I went back to the kitchen and ran my bleeding finger under the cold tap. The noise in the dining room had already resumed. A few broken plates were just a minor interruption. The Thanksgiving Day football game started on TV. Nearing 10 o'clock, it was time for pie and coffee. I was called out again, set up at a small card table in the corner to cut and serve the pies. They sat around the TV, laughing and shouting, occasionally barking an order at me. "Thinner slice, more whipped cream." I silently obeyed. As the game clock ticked down, the fireworks from the neighborhood started. A barrage of pops and bangs that drowned out the TV. The family got excited. "Sarah, get the coffee brewed," Brenda ordered. "And tidy up the dessert plates. Don't just stand there like a log." I did as I was told. As everyone gathered by the windows to watch the impromptu fireworks show, the living room emptied out, except for a few of the older kids playing in the corner. I was clearing the coffee cups when my eyes fell on the coffee table. Amidst the empty glasses and wrappers lay several phones. One of them, in a plain black case, was Kevin's. In his rush to see the fireworks, he'd just tossed it there. My steps faltered for a microsecond. My heart gave a single, heavy, powerful beat. I lowered my eyes and continued toward the kitchen. The chain clanked rhythmically. At the kitchen door, I stopped. I glanced back. The kids were in the corner, their backs to the table. The women were at the window, oohing and ahing. No one was paying attention. The final 2 minutes of the football game were a chaotic roar from the TV. I turned, not into the kitchen, but, as if just going to clear the last of the glasses, I dragged the chain a few steps toward the coffee table. The length was just enough to reach. My movements were smooth, without a hint of hesitation. My left hand picked up an empty glass. My right hand, as if by accident, brushed across the table, my fingertips grazing the black phone. The crowd on the TV roared as the final play ended. The boom of a particularly large firework shook the house. In that single, deafening moment that could cover any small sound, my pinky finger, swift and practiced, pressed the side button of the phone. Click! The screen lit up. I didn't even need to look down. My left hand, holding the glass, shielded the phone from view as my right thumb flew across the screen. I knew his passcode, his payment passwords, everything. He'd never bothered to hide them from me. In his eyes, I wasn't a threat. I was a harmless, stupid possession. My actions were shockingly fast. Open WhatsApp. Find the group Miller Family Fun, which included every last aunt, uncle, and cousin. Select Attach. Then, from the tiny micro SD card, hidden in my silver locket, I uploaded one audio file and one photo. The audio file was the entire confrontation on the stairs. Brenda's curses, the sound of the slap, Kevin's cold cancellation of my ticket, my mother's sobbing voicemail. The photo was one I had taken that morning with an old burner phone I kept hidden, a close-up of the thick metal chain locked to my pale, raw, bleeding ankle. The other end attached to the heavy U-lock, clamped to the oak bed frame. The background was the dirty, cluttered corner of the kitchen. The picture was brutally, documentary-level clear. Send. Log out. Clear recent apps. Lock screen. The entire process took less than 15 seconds. I picked up the empty glass and calmly turned back to the kitchen, as if nothing had happened. I placed the glass in the sink and turned on the water, washing away the last, faint tremor from my fingertips. The fireworks died down. Kevin and the men came back inside, reeking of gunpowder and triumph. "Happy Thanksgiving," they boomed. The house filled again with boisterous cheer. I turned off the water and leaned against the cold kitchen wall. Through the pass-through, I saw Kevin walk to the coffee table, grab his phone, glance at it blankly, and shove it in his pocket. He was too drunk and excited to notice anything. No one had noticed anything. I looked down at the chain on my ankle. Then I reached up and touched the now empty silver locket. The Thanksgiving gift had been delivered. I slowly lifted my head, my calm gaze fixed on the people reveling in their holiday joy, completely oblivious to the storm about to break. I listened to their laughter, looked at their radiant faces. Very slowly, in the dark corner where no one could see, under the last fading light of a firework, my lips curved into a distinct, cold smile. A real smile this time, tinged with the rust of blood and frozen hatred and a cruel, delicious anticipation. The show was about to begin. Happy Thanksgiving, my dear family. I hope you enjoy your surprise. The morning after Thanksgiving. The air was lazy and smelled of spent fireworks. Tradition dictated that everyone could sleep in. But that tradition didn't apply to me. As soon as the sun was up, the familiar clanking of the chain sounded in the bedroom. I was awake. I had barely slept. The raw skin on my ankle burned. My body ached, but my mind was sharp, buzzing with a cold excitement. I went through my morning routine and headed downstairs to the kitchen, a cold, silent battlefield of last night's feast. I rolled up my sleeves and began to clean. The first person down was Jessica. She saw me, her lips curling. "Up early, are we?" Such a hard worker. I didn't respond. She leaned against the doorframe, sipping hot water, her eyes boring into the chain on my leg. "You know, Sarah," she drawled, "you bring this on yourself. Is wearing that thing on a holiday really a good look? If word gets out, it's the Miller family that will be embarrassed." I stayed silent. Her face tightened in annoyance. Then again, some people are just born to be leashed. Can't sit still otherwise. "Jessica," I said suddenly, my voice quiet but cutting through her monologue. She flinched. I turned off the water, dried my hands, and looked her straight in the eye. My gaze was as still as a deep, dark pond. "The water is boiling, and Mom said she wanted fresh oatmeal this morning. I'm making it now. If you're not busy, could you wipe down the dining table? Everyone will be down soon." My tone was flat, almost a command. She opened her mouth to snap back, but my gaze stopped her. It was too calm, terrifyingly calm. I have to get the kids dressed," she stammered, and fled. I smirked. Guilty. One by one, they came down Tiffany, Karen, Susan. Each one started with a customary sneer or command, and each one faltered when I met their eyes with that same unnatural calm and responded with a simple, direct statement. They didn't know what had happened, but their instincts screamed that something was wrong. Brenda was the last to arrive, radiating the smug satisfaction of a matriarch. She saw the fresh oatmeal and side dishes on the table and nodded, pleased. The family gathered, the atmosphere subdued. They were all hungover. They saw the chain, but no one said a word. The quiet was broken by my father-in-law, George. He was scrolling through his phone, his brow furrowed. "What's wrong, dear?" Brenda asked. George didn't answer. His face grew dark. He looked up, his sharp eyes scanning everyone at the table. "Who sent this garbage to the Miller Family Fun Group?" "Garbage?" Kevin leaned over to look. Susan pulled out her phone. "I don't see anything, Dad. The last messages are from last night." The others checked their phones too. I silently put down my spoon. My heartbeat was steady. Not a message, a file, George snapped, slamming his phone on the table. An audio file and a picture. Who sent it? Everyone looked bewildered. Kevin picked up his father's phone. What audio file? He scrolled up. His finger froze. The color drained from his face. A second later, Jessica's phone clattered onto the table, her face white with horror. Her trembling finger pointed from her screen to Brenda, then to me. Karen, impatient, tapped the file on her own phone. The next second, she shrieked, her voice high enough to shatter glass. Who did this? Who did this? The recording had started with her own voice from the stairwell. Mom, you should hold on to this. It's not safe with her. Brenda still didn't understand. She snatched the phone from George. She squinted at the screen. She pressed play. Her own voice filled the silent dining room. Where the hell do you think you're going, you bitch? Whether your father lives or dies has nothing to do with the Miller family. The cruel, screeching voice was unmistakable. Then came Kevin's cold tone. Cancellation successful. You can eat the fee. And finally, my mother's sobbing, desperate voicemail. The recording ended. And then came the picture. The close-up of the chain. The raw, bleeding ankle. The heavy U-lock. The dirty kitchen corner. It was irrefutable. Boom! A silent thunderclap. Brenda's hand began to shake violently. The blood drained from her face, her lips trembling, unable to form words. All her authority, her power, vanished, replaced by pure, abject terror. Kevin leaped to his feet, the chair scraping loudly behind him. His face was a ghastly shade of greenish-white. He whipped his head around, his eyes locking on me, a look of murderous rage on his face. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out, only ragged, choked breaths. The other men were frozen, their faces a mixture of shock, confusion, and anger at being implicated. The sisters-in-law looked like they'd seen a ghost. Who did it? Brenda finally found her voice. She slammed the phone down, her face contorted. She was like a rabid animal, her bloodshot eyes finally fixing on me. You! Her trembling finger shot out, aimed at my face. It was you, you venomous snake. You dared. You took a picture and sent it to the group. You traitor. All eyes, like spotlights, swiveled to me. And under their intense, hateful glare, I slowly put down my fork. I raised my head, meeting Brenda's fiery gaze, Kevin's murderous stare, and the shocked, furious looks from everyone else. My face showed none of the panic or fear they expected. There was only a profound, bottomless calm. Then I spoke, my voice soft, but carrying through the room with a strange, cold clarity. Brenda, I said, my words like ice chips falling on the tile. What are you talking about? What recording? What picture? I tilted my head, a look of innocent confusion on my face. A perfect performance. You took my phone yesterday, remember? A dead, suffocating silence fell over the room. My question, so simple, so innocent, was like a bucket of ice water on a volcano. The rage stalled, replaced by a steamy, chilling confusion. Their eyes shifted from me to Brenda. The accusation in their gazes turned to suspicion. That's right. Brenda took her phone. Everyone had seen it. So who recorded the audio? Who took the picture? And who used Kevin's phone to send it at the height of the fireworks last night? Brenda herself? Impossible. Kevin? Even more impossible. One of the others? Why would they? The united front against me, fractured in an instant. You're lying, Brenda stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. If it wasn't you, who was it? This family only has one curse, and it's you. You want to destroy us. I maintained my look of wounded confusion. I really don't know what you're talking about. I was busy all day yesterday. You and Jessica and Tiffany can all attest to that. And then, didn't you? I paused deliberately, my eyes flicking down to my own ankle, where the chain and U-lock were brutally visible. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. And then you chained me up, like a prisoner. How could I have done any of it? Stop playing the victim, Kevin finally snapped out of his stupor. He lunged towards me, his face purple with rage. Tell me, did you do it? Did you steal my phone? He reached to grab me. I shifted, just enough to avoid his hand. You dare to dodge me, he roared, raising his hand to strike. Stop! George, my father-in-law, who had been silent, finally spoke. His voice was low, but carried the weight of absolute authority. What are you doing? Isn't this embarrassing enough? Kevin froze, his hand in midair. Dad, it was her. It has to be. Where's your proof? George's cold, cloudy eyes bored into his son, then swept over the table, finally landing on me, searching for any crack in my facade. Proof? Kevin sputtered, then, as if finding a lifeline, pointed at my leg. The proof is right there. This chain. This lock. This is the proof. He wanted to say, we chained her because she tried to run away, but the words died on his lips. Chaining your wife in private was one thing. Having it exposed to the entire family, alongside that damning audio, was another. What does that prove? I asked softly, my voice laced with a tremor not of fear, but of profound, falsely accused grief. It proves you all chained me. Does it prove that I recorded anything? That I took a picture? That I sent a message? I looked up, my eyes welling with tears. I refused to let fall. A trick I'd learned from them. My phone was taken. I was chained in this house. What could I have used to record? What could I have used to take a picture? And how could I have possibly gotten Kevin's phone? My gaze finally settled on Kevin. Kevin, last night your phone was on the coffee table. During the fireworks, everyone was either outside or by the window. The only people in the living room were the kids, playing. I was in the kitchen, serving pie. My logic was a cold, hard line. I didn't accuse anyone. I just laid out the facts. I, the prisoner, had no means. The others, free to move about, all had the opportunity. The seed of suspicion began to sprout wildly. The sisters-in-law started eyeing each other, then their husbands, then their children. What are you looking at me for? Karen shrieked. You think I sent it? Am I crazy? It wasn't my kids, Jessica screeched. My little Tyler is only 5. What does he know? In an instant, they were all at each other's throats, defending their own, the fragile alliance of family dissolving into a pit of vipers. Enough! Brenda screamed, her voice cracking. She glared at her squabbling children, then back at me, the quiet, wounded-looking source of all the chaos. Her eyes widened as a thought struck her. Wait, she hissed, latching onto a final hope. The picture. How do you explain the picture? That angle. It was taken from your perspective. That chain. That leg. If you didn't take it yourself, who did? All eyes snapped back to me. She was right. The photo was a close-up, taken from below. I met her gaze. The grief on my face slowly receded, replaced by that deep, still calm. My lips twitched into the faintest, coldest of smiles. The picture, I repeated softly. Then, as they all held their breath, I slowly, deliberately bent down. The chain clanked. I reached out not for the lock, but to gently touch the raw, chafed skin on my ankle. I looked back up, my gaze sweeping over each of them before landing on Brenda's face, which was now a mask of confusion, rage, and a dawning horror she didn't want to admit. I spoke, my voice a low, clear growl. You're right, Brenda. The picture is very clear. You can even see the broken skin on my leg. I paused, my eyes wide with an almost childlike innocence that sent a chill down their spines. I wonder, I mused, my voice dropping to a near whisper, a needle of ice piercing the tense silence, what the person who knelt at my feet to take that picture was thinking. Were they thinking, this chain is very sturdy? Or were they thinking? My voice got even softer, yet it boomed in their ears like a drum. Her ankle has been chained for so long. I bet that really hurts. That final, whispered question was a poisoned dagger. It didn't accuse, it implicated. It painted a picture of a cold, deliberate act of cruelty, an act that could have been perpetrated by any of them, turning them from mere observers into potential conspirators. Brenda's sanity snapped. Lies! You're spitting poison! She scrambled up, knocking her chair over, her face a terrifying shade of purple. It was you! You evil witch! I'll kill you! She lunged at me. Mom, stop! Her sons grabbed her, holding her back as she thrashed and screamed like a madwoman. Enough! George roared. slamming his fists on the table with all his might. He glared at his hysterical wife, then his cold, furious eyes cut to me. He finally saw it. The woman in front of him was not the meek girl they had tormented for years. "Sarah," he said, his voice raspy with suppressed rage, "I don't care who did it. You will delete that file and that photo from the group right now. Do you understand me? Delete it." I looked at him, the true emperor of this house. "I already told you," I said softly. "My phone was confiscated. How can I delete anything?" George's face twitched. "Use your husband's phone to log into your account and delete it," Brenda shrieked. I looked at her, my eyes clear and merciless. "My WhatsApp account is linked to an old number of Kevin's. The password is his birthday. I haven't used it in so long. I've forgotten how to log in." Another silent blow. Now Kevin was implicated again. "I didn't do it," he howled, trapped and furious. "It doesn't matter," George said, his voice weary but firm. He looked at me, a flicker of something new in his eyes' negotiation. "Sarah, I know you've been wronged. My wife and son were impulsive. Here's what we'll do. You delete it. I will make Kevin apologize. We will unlock this chain right now. And after the holiday weekend, I'll have Kevin drive you to see your father. From now on, your sisters-in-law will share the housework. How does that sound?" He was offering a truce, an apology, freedom, a promise of a better future. The old Sarah would have wept with gratitude. But the old Sarah was dead. I looked at him, and a slow, cold, tiny smile formed on my lips. "Dad," I said, my voice like ice, "does it really matter anymore who sent it? There are over 40 people in that group. Uncles, aunts, cousins. Kevin's boss is even in there. They've all seen it. They've all heard it. Do you think they'll believe it was a child playing with a phone? Or will they believe it's the true story of what happened in the Miller family on Thanksgiving? The story of a woman whose mother-in-law cursed her, whose husband canceled her ticket to see her dying father, and who was then chained by her ankle like an animal. A true story from inside the Miller Family Fun group." A dead silence. George's face went slack. Brenda stopped struggling. Kevin collapsed into his chair, his face ashen. They finally understood. The damage was done. It couldn't be deleted. It couldn't be undone. The story was out. And I, the chained prisoner, was the one holding the match that had lit the entire rotten edifice on fire. "What? What do you want?" Brenda finally whispered, her voice hoarse, stripped of all its power. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, a form of torture in itself. Finally, I looked at them, my voice flat and businesslike. "First," I said, holding up one finger, "the key to this chain, my driver's license, my phone, right now." George gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Brenda, defeated, fumbled in her pocket and threw the small brass key and my ID onto the floor between us. Kevin, his eyes burning with a hateful fire, slammed my old phone onto the table. "Second," I said, holding up a second finger, "my father's hospital bills. I want $14,000. Transferred to my account, now." "You might as well just rob us," Brenda shrieked. "On what grounds?" Kevin roared. My voice remained level. "On the grounds of the $10,000 in wedding gift money my parents gave me, which Brenda held for safekeeping and I never saw again. On the grounds of 5 years of unpaid labor as this family's cook, maid, and servant. And on the grounds that yesterday, you destroyed my only way to see my dying father, and then you did this." My eyes dropped to the chain. 14,000 is a bargain for the emotional distress and physical abuse you've inflicted. Of course, I added lightly, you can refuse. And then, when the police and social services come asking questions, I wonder what story I should tell them about this chain. A daughter-in-law extorting her family, or a victim of unlawful imprisonment and domestic abuse trying to get back what's hers to save her father's life. Which one do you think sounds more believable? The word police was a physical blow. "Give it to her," George rasped, his voice sounding 10 years older. He knew I would do it. He knew they were trapped. Kevin, trembling with rage, transferred the money. My phone buzzed. $14,000. "Now," I said, my voice dropping. "Pick up the key. Come here. And unlock it." I looked at the key on the floor, then at Brenda's collapsed form. Forcing her to unlock the chain herself was a fate worse than death. It was the ultimate humiliation, the complete annihilation of her authority. She shook her head, muttering, "No, no." "Brenda," I said softly, "when you locked it, did you ever think you'd be the one to unlock it?" Finally, under the murderous glare of her husband and the dead-eyed silence of her son, Brenda stumbled forward. She fumbled with the key, her hands shaking too much to fit it in the lock. Tears and snot streamed down her face. She crouched, a difficult, painful movement for her at my feet. Click! The lock opened. The cold cuff fell away. A sharp pain shot through my newly freed ankle, followed by a dizzying sense of release. Brenda tossed the chain aside with a loud clatter and collapsed to the floor, sobbing, not with remorse, but with the agony of total defeat. I didn't look at her. I bent down, picked up my ID, and walked to the table to retrieve my phone. I gave the room one last look at the sobbing woman on the floor, at the broken man in the chair, at the terrified, hollow faces of the family. I turned and walked to the front door. Behind me was a tomb of silence and broken sobs. I pulled the heavy door open. The fresh, cold air of the morning after Thanksgiving hit my face. I stepped outside and pulled the door shut, sealing all the filth, all the coldness, all the nauseating reunion behind me for good. Epilogue. 1 year later. The willow trees outside the hospital window were sprouting tender green buds. My father, propped up in his hospital bed, looked pale, but his eyes were bright. He was sipping the chicken soup I'd made. After a year of treatment and careful recovery, his condition had stabilized. The doctor said he could go home in a few days. "That's enough, Sarah. I'm full," he said with a contented smile. My mother, peeling an apple beside him, looked up and laughed. The cloud of sorrow that had hovered over her for a year was finally gone. This scene, this quiet peace, was something I had fought for. It was exhausting, but it was a worthy exhaustion, filled with real warmth and hope. "Oh, Sarah," my mother said carefully, "your aunt saw Brenda Miller in town yesterday." My hand, which was peeling an orange, paused for a fraction of a second. "Oh, how is she?" "Not well," my mother sighed. "Your aunt said she's aged 20 years. Hair's all white. She avoids everyone. Looks like a ghost." I said nothing. "And Kevin," she continued, "lost his job, of course. After that incident went viral in the family group. Word got around his office. They fired him. I heard he moved down south somewhere, working labor jobs. Hasn't been back. The whole family fell apart. The brothers and sisters fought over who was to blame, then they fought over money for their parents' care. They don't speak anymore." My father just patted my hand. I took a slice of orange. It was sweet and sharp on my tongue. The fate of Kevin and his family didn't bring me joy or pity. It was just a story I had already read, a play whose ending I already knew. They were last winter's snow, melted and gone, unable to cause even a ripple in my life now. Later that afternoon, I was walking in the small hospital garden when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unfamiliar number. "Miss Sarah Jenkins, this is Attorney Lee from the Sunlight Legal Aid Center. The final judgment on your divorce proceedings has been issued. The court has granted the dissolution of marriage and approved your requests for the division of assets, including the return of marital gifts and compensation for damages. The official documents have been mailed to your address. Congratulations on the official start of your new life. Best wishes." The divorce was final. I stared at the screen for a long time. There was no elation, no sadness, just the quiet closing of a long, painful chapter. I deleted the message. I sat on a bench in the sun. The warmth soaked into my skin, into my bones. There were no curses, no slaps, no clanking chains. Just the sound of the wind, the distant traffic, and my own steady breathing. The future would be hard. My father's recovery would be long and expensive. I had to rebuild my own life and career. But I wasn't afraid. My feet were free. My heart was free. I was no longer an appendage to anyone. I was Sarah Jenkins. I was my parents' daughter. I was the master of my own life. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small, silver locket. I held it in my palm. The sun had warmed the metal. The hateful weapons it once carried had served their purpose and were gone. Now it was empty, ready to be filled with new things. Courage, hope, the warm, real light of the spring sun. From a distant window, the faint sound of music drifted on the lazy afternoon breeze. I opened my eyes and looked up at the vast, blue sky. There were no chains there, only endless possibility, and a new life, truly my own, just beginning.